Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday webinar. Andrew Mangeris here is going to be your host this evening. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Kyäni, and we have a special guest with us tonight, and I'm excited to have him on. We're going to dive into one of the ingredients that we've never done a webinar on. We've never done a lot of training on. As a matter of fact, we introduced it last year in our Sunset product, and then since then we haven't done a whole lot on it. So I'm super excited to be able to offer a little bit more training and information on this ingredient. But first, let's get to who we have here. Actually, let's go through our disclaimers here. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or condition. The clinical studies depicted in this presentation address the impact of specified ingredients generally and not any Kyäni product specifically. So with that, I would like to introduce our guest speaker for this evening. And we have Mr. Bob Capelli, who wrote the first book on astaxanthin. And of course, here's a cover of another one of his books, most recent books and very well noted books, called Natural Astaxanthin, the supplement you can feel. So with that, I would like to bring on Mr. Bob Capelli, an astaxanthin expert who has been at this for over 20 years. Bob, can you hear me?
I certainly can, Andrew.
Great. Welcome to our Wednesday webinar. We sure appreciate you being on our Wednesday webinar this evening. And let's go ahead and jump right in and talk a little bit about astaxanthin.
Well, sure. And first of all, thank you so much for having me on. This is a great honor for me. I've been working with this ingredient for 18 years. I've been taking it for 19 years. So I'm one of the early adopters when it first came on the market. And really, I got into the business of astaxanthin only because I was taking it and feeling results. I felt it working in my body. And that's very unusual I got to say something about Kyäni. Kyäni has some products that are amazing. I just really started taking, just in the last few weeks, the sunrise and sunset formulas. And I love waking up to the sunrise. I mean, you can actually feel the energy. You can really feel it working in your body. And the other one that that we're talking about today is the sunset, which has this astaxanthin ingredient. And that's another one that you can really feel working. We'll talk a little bit about some of the ways you can feel it. Now, you'll see right here, we have, this was 2011. This is the Dr. Oz show. And the gentleman to Dr. Oz's right is, well, left if you're looking at him, right if you're Dr. Oz, is Dr. Joseph Mercola. And they talked about astaxanthin. It was, not a long segment. It was about a 5-minute segment. But as you can see from the backdrop, they called it the #1 supplement you've never heard of that you should be taking. And there's a lot of reasons why you should be taking it, Andrew, for sure.
Awesome. And it's gotten some notoriety, but most people still, I'm amazed, even after, a show like that, still have never heard of it. As a matter of fact, when I talk to our people about Kyäni and the ingredients in there, and I mention astaxanthin, that they stumble and what is that? How do you say that? And that frequently happens. And so I'm excited to be able to talk a little bit more about it. Let's go on to this next slide. Tell us a little bit about what it really is.
So if you look at these two molecules, one is beta-carotene, which is probably the most famous of the carotenoids. Astaxanthin is the same family as beta-carotene. It's very closely related structurally and in terms of the molecular formula. However, on the ends of the molecule you'll see those two little circles. Those are called hydroxyl groups. What they do is they allow astaxanthin to really to work much more profoundly as an antioxidant, as an anti-inflammatory. The ends of the molecule can wrap themselves around our cells and protect our entire cells, and they can bond with many, many different free radicals, oxidants at the same time. Between 13 and 19 free radicals they can neutralize before they become exhausted. So it's very different, even though it's the same family as beta-carotene, lutein, lycopene, all these other carotenoids. It's very different and much more potent.
Awesome. Thank you. And in a couple slides here, we'll talk a little bit about that potency and how it compares to some other ingredients. But first, let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits. This is what a lot of people call the healthy 10, because there's 10 key areas of astaxanthin and what they help with. And you can see here a lot of the different studies, clinical studies, human studies on astaxanthin in each of these areas. Tell us a little bit about some of these key, or the healthy 10.
Well, you know what? First thing I got to say is I have to apologize because Andrew, you let me review this PowerPoint before we presented it, and I didn't notice that this was my original set of. It's the same set, I should say. It's the same healthy 10. You know, these are clinically validated health benefits, but it's been updated since. I really apologize. This was a total oversight. I don't know how I did this, but by now this is just 2 years after I originally made this. There are actually over 100 more studies per year. So for example, brain health, there used to be 4 human clinical studies. There are now 9 human clinical studies. So there's a lot more of each of these. But the main point is that astaxanthin, we're not just saying this is good for these things. We're not just saying, oh, people, testimonial evidence, or people say it's great, or it's backed up on 10 distinct health benefits. And all of them now have at minimum 5 human clinical studies to back them up. And for each of them, as you can see, there are usually like dozens of different preclinical trials, meaning either in vitro work in test tubes, or a lot of animal studies too, in rodents and such. But the wealth of benefits for anyone, ranging from eye and brain health, helping your heart, helping with anti-aging, your skin, boosting immunity. For athletes, there are 12 different benefits for athletes. For your joints, if you have any kind of arthritic conditions or just joint soreness from overuse, and even male fertility. It's right down the line. All of these 10 that you're looking at are absolutely validated with clinical research.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we'll have to update this when we actually record it and show the newer version of this. So thanks for letting me know on that. Now, this next one is a great story. This one I absolutely love. Tell us what we're seeing here, and the story behind these green and these green algae.
So what I usually tell people, Andrew, when I'm trying to educate them about what astaxanthin is and what it can do is, I usually say, if you can really just kind of grasp the essence of this one slide, you can really understand the power and the potential health benefits of astaxanthin. So astaxanthin is extracted from algae, or at least there are a couple ways to make it. You can make it synthetically from petrochemicals. That one hasn't been validated in human clinical trials. The one we're talking about is the one that has all those studies you saw in the last slide. So it's extracted from algae. The algae is called, it's a fancy Latin name, it's called Haematococcus pluvialis. And the slides you see on or the cells you see on the left are the green. That's the normal healthy state of this algae. And they have you see that word flagella. I don't know if you can see them. It's kind of faint, but they have little sort of legs that help them to swim through the water. So the algae is moving around. It's motile. It's happy. It's thriving. And what we do in order to make the algae hyperaccumulate astaxanthin is we create stress to the organism. And we do that 2 different ways. The first thing we do is we stop feeding it completely. We cut off all nutrients. And, as everyone probably knows, for any living, animal or plant, you need nutrition to survive. So that's the first thing we do. We're starving it to death. The second thing we do is we take it from being covered from the sunlight, and we put it into intense ultraviolet UV sunlight exposure. And in just a period of 1 week, the algae cells, they go from green to that deep red you see on the right side. And that means that they've hyperaccumulated huge amounts of astaxanthin. The reason they're doing that, Andrew, it's a survival mechanism. The algae are trying to survive. Now, here's the most incredible thing about astaxanthin is that the algae cells can survive for over 40 years. This has been documented with no food, no water, in intense sunlight, extreme cold, extreme heat. No matter what you do to them, the algae is protecting the astaxanthin is protecting the algae cells and allowing them to survive. Now, when we ingest astaxanthin into our bodies, say in the Sunset formula, it's known and it's shown and proven in scientific studies to be able to get throughout our entire bodies from head to toe. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, we'll talk about later. It gets into the skin, it gets bonds with muscle tissue, gets into the heart, gets into the eyes and brain, obviously, gets into all our different cells. And on a cellular level in our bodies, it's protecting our cells just like it does the algae cells. So we call it the 40-year protector. It's really a unique and phenomenal molecule.
Now, and just to clarify to everybody, we use, you talked about that you can actually create it synthetically, but of course in our Sunset, we use this natural form of astaxanthin. Of course, our Sunset is an all natural product as well. But to me, that's just amazing that 40 years that can survive that long. Okay, now talk to me a little bit about this. This was a pioneering study on astaxanthin and salmon. Tell me a little bit about this one.
So yeah, there's a lot of stories about salmon. We'll talk about another one later. So this was a study where young, baby salmon, fish fry, they call them, were either given astaxanthin from algae, astaxanthin that was produced synthetically, or astaxanthin that's from a yeast called Phaphia. And what happened is the salmon, most, in nature, most of these young fish will not survive adulthood. And so only 17% were surviving. Now, when given increasing amounts of astaxanthin, the natural astaxanthin from algae, the salmon could survive at much higher rates, at only 1 part per million. So that's way, way less than even 1%. It's about 0.00001% astaxanthin added to their feed. 87% of the salmon survive versus 17%. Increasing up to 13.7 parts per million, almost all the fish survive, 98%. So, I mean, this is an incredible thing for the salmon farmers because they're going to be much, much more successful. They're going to have a lot more fish live. But think about what this is doing for just general organisms, any sort of animal, and we've seen this in a lot of other animals as well. When you take it, you have much more resistance to stress. You have more resistance to disease. You have you're going to live healthier and longer by taking this molecule astaxanthin.
Yep. Okay, so now one of the things I want to explain here is we use in our Sunset product a wild Alaskan salmon. And one of the reasons we use this wild Alaskan salmon is because there's naturally occurring higher amounts of astaxanthin in there. But it's also one of the highest concentrations of astaxanthin you can find anywhere. And one of the things that they have found is that their ability to go upstream is one of the greatest athletic feats in any known animal kingdom of what they have to do in order to go upstream before they spawn. And so here's a picture of some of the salmon here. Anything that you can add on this, Bob, and talking about this athletic feat of what they have to do?
Well, yeah, absolutely, Andrew. I mean, think about it. These salmon go for over a week sometimes up raging rivers, up waterfalls. It's without a doubt the greatest athletic feat in nature. Now, the reason they can do this is because the salmon in the animal world have naturally, from their diets, the highest concentration of natural astaxanthin. And within the salmon's bodies, the astaxanthin tends to accumulate in their muscles. So when people do exercise, when animals do exercise, it's creating very, very high levels of free radicals, of oxidants, of oxidation. And frankly, it can be up to 10 times more than in a normal state. So the astaxanthin is completely quenching these free radicals and the oxidants, and it's allowing the salmon to swim up rivers for a week on end. So it's really, for anyone doing any kind of endurance exercise, fantastic supplement.
Awesome. Awesome. And of course, here's a diagram of some of the different type of muscles that you're going to get astaxanthin in and actually bonding to. And one of the things you mentioned is how astaxanthin can just get everywhere. And there's a reason behind that. And if we look at this slide right here, you want to explain a little bit of why astaxanthin get so many places in the body?
So the molecule astaxanthin is unique in the sense that it's both water-loving and fat-loving. So most, like if you take an antioxidant like vitamin C, that's a fat-loving a water-loving antioxidant. And so that can help the water-soluble part of your cells and protect it from oxidation and inflammation. Now, when you take, say, vitamin E, that's a fat-loving antioxidant, as is beta-carotene, as are all carotenoids in general. Astaxanthin is unique in that it can, the molecule is very long, and it can actually span the cell membrane and protect both the fat-soluble and the water-soluble part of the cell. So not only does it get throughout our entire bodies and protect all of our cells, also within each cell, it's protecting both parts of the cell.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, so let's go into this. People talk about the blood-brain barrier. You know, you take supplements. It's very difficult to take a supplement that you know is going to actually help in the brain. Tell me what astaxanthin does. So
this is really kind of amazing, but even other carotenoids that are in the same chemical family as astaxanthin, a lot of them can't cross the blood-brain barrier and actually get to the brain and then cross the blood-retinal barrier and get to the eyes. So they may be, you know, I shouldn't say they may be, they are very, very good, healthy things to have in our diets. Things like lycopene, things like zeaxanthin, things like beta-carotene even. They're great for us, but they're not going to be able to protect these very, very important organs, of which the brain to me is, you know, perhaps the most important. And astaxanthin is documented actually since the 1940s and 50s. There's been research showing it can actually get into the brain and eyes. So once it gets there, providing antioxidant, anti-inflammatory protection to keep these vital organs absolutely running at their very best.
Thank you. On when it comes to astaxanthin, many people talk about it being the world's most potent antioxidant. And here are some different studies that have been done to show how truly potent this natural astaxanthin is as an antioxidant. Tell me your experience in the potency of this as an antioxidant.
So there have been a lot of studies. We're just showing two here, but no matter what other natural antioxidant you put it up against, and I stress natural because there are one or two synthetic antioxidants that are not necessarily good for us, but they are very potent. But for natural stuff, the stuff that you really want to take that has no contaminants or side effects, you put it up against any one of these and it's extremely potent. You're talking like levels of usually about 10 to 20 times more potent than other carotenoids. And you're talking sometimes hundreds, or even in this one on the left is up against vitamin C. It's 6,000 times more potent at quenching free radicals and removing them from our systems than vitamin C. It's 20 times, the natural version is 20 times more potent than synthetic astaxanthin. I think it's 13 times more potent than pycnogenol, another very good antioxidant. On the other side, CoQ10, a wonderful substance. I take it every day myself for my heart. But astaxanthin, 800 times more potent in quenching singlet oxygen. So no matter what you're taking it with against, it's going to work so many more times and so much more potent. And again, getting all throughout the body to every cell.
Awesome. Now this talks a little bit about inflammation. This was a study done to show inflammation. Tell me what's going on and what they did in this study.
You know, I'm really glad that you chose this slide as well, Andrew, because we've talked about antioxidants in the supplement industry for many, many, many years. We've talked about inflammation for not quite as long, but scientists and doctors are finding out that inflammation is the root cause of, frankly, most diseases that kill us. So combating this persistent, what they call systemic, or the nickname for it is silent inflammation, because it lives in our bodies years and even decades and slowly deteriorating our health. Now, you're showing one particular test here against an inflammatory marker called prostaglandin E2, but there have been 8 different distinct inflammatory markers that astaxanthin has been shown to gently reduce. And I stress the word gently because some anti-inflammatories that you take as a prescription drug that are synthetically produced they can actually work much more intensely on one inflammatory marker. But what that does, it knocks our bodies out of whack. It knocks out our natural balance, and they do have very serious side effects. Astaxanthin works on 8 different inflammatory markers, prostaglandin being one of them, nitric oxide being another, tumor necrosis factor, nuclear kappa B, COX-1, COX-2 enzymes. There's so many of them, but it works gently reducing them. So it helps with painful conditions, also reduces silent inflammation as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. Any final comments wrapping up here before we finish the webinar? Anything else on astaxanthin that you want to communicate to our field?
So, that book that you showed is about 280 pages long. So there's a lot to learn about astaxanthin. A lot of it is just going through all the different clinical studies and, really talking more in detail. And, but the thing I want to stress is that Kyäni is a company that not only chooses great ingredients to put in their formulas, and if you look at the Sunrise and Sunset, these are 2 of my favorite supplements. I just started a couple of weeks ago taking them, but I love them. And I looked at the formulas. I've been in this industry for 30 years, and these are great products. And you're using the real good source of astaxanthin, the natural source from algae, the one that's clinically validated, as you are with all your other ingredients and all your formulas. So I love your company. I love what you guys are doing. And I thank you for having me on this webinar today. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Bob, I want to thank you again. We appreciate you coming on, and thank everybody for joining us. Again, next week we will have our Wednesday webinar. It'll be at the same time, 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and Skylar Stephenson, our Vice President of Sales, will be on the call next week. Thank you guys for joining with us. Have a wonderful day.